So our next presenter, like I said, is Ms. Kinze Kuto. And yeah, any question on clinical trial, this is your person. Okay, so you better ask. Earlier on, I got a question from someone who asked me, you know, when they never heard anything about animal trials, are we now the animals? But before we go to here, thank you so much, Dr. Semeti. Your talk was very interesting and very informative as usual, as always. And I know that you are pressed for time to go somewhere else. And yeah, I'll probably chat to you offline. But thank you so much. And yeah, we know how busy you are. and I need to say that personally, I think SAHPRA is doing a very wonderful work, and we've seen you being pushed as an organization, and you have delivered. And thank you very much for serving the country and for doing very good work. I believe that you are on the right track, and I think we are safe in your hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really an honor to be here, and thanks for all the questions. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Kuto, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tauge, and thanks also to Dr. Semeti as well as Dr. Bosho for paving the way for my presentation. So some of what they've already said is what I was going to talk about, and yeah, I will just elaborate a bit where necessary. But yeah, this is about clinical trials. As Dr. Tauge said, you can ask me any question about clinical trials, but easy ones, please. Okay, let's go to the actual presentation. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, let's hear what the clinical trial is. A clinical trial is a medical research intervention that involves human volunteers, and it is actually conducted in order to answer some health questions. It's also a way to determine if a new medical intervention is safe for use in humans, and apart from being safe, is it even effective? Is it efficacious? Will it do what it's meant to do in a human body? But clinical trials are not just conducted without any guidelines. There are set guidelines on which clinical trials are conducted, and there are set guidelines on which to draft what the guidance or the guidelines of conducting a clinical trial. And that plan needs to be approved. That particular plan that is put together for a clinical trial needs to be an approved one. A document that contains all those guidelines that tell you how a clinical trial is going to be conducted is called a protocol. So there are some parts of the protocol. Everything about the protocol is important, but I just noted a few parts of the protocol that are also very important. And first of all, what is looked at is why that clinical trial is being conducted or needs to be conducted. And for the benefit of the participants of that clinical trial, is there an informed consent form? How has it been drafted? Will it provide all the necessary information to a clinical trial participant? Does it tell them what are the benefits of participating in that clinical trial? What are the risks because you need to be told about the risks as well, so that when you sign up for a clinical trial, you know what you are getting yourself into. Not to say that it's dangerous, but you are well informed and you know that if there are any risks, if indeed they occur, what is going to happen. So that is being looked at as well. And what drugs? By drug, I mean a medicinal product that is being used for a clinical trial. So what drug is involved in doing this particular clinical trial, at what dosage, and what is the procedure, meaning how often are you going to get this drug, and under what circumstances, and for how long. So this, what I've just discussed now, is part of what the previous speaker, Dr. Makokotlela, Dr. Smith Makokotlela, it's part of what his agency, her agency looks at when they do a review of the clinical trial, and so that they can decide whether they say yay or nay to that particular clinical trial. Okay, why do we need clinical trials? It's because at some point there is an illness that needs to be diagnosed. There is a condition that needs to be diagnosed, be it with a diagnostic device or whatever manner. But for us to even get to that point, there has to be a clinical trial conducted so that we know for sure if this disease is what we think it is. Okay, and clinical trials are also conducted to get a treatment for a disease. What researchers think is a potential treatment for a particular disease, or a potential, for example, an antibiotic. So the antibiotics that you are seeing on the market have gone through clinical trials. For them to ultimately sit there, it means they have been proven through clinical trials to be effective against that particular condition that they are meant to treat. Dr. Boshoff touched on that as well as vaccines. That vaccines are there not to prevent diseases. You get the vaccine in order that you can prevent or there is prevention for a particular disease. A good example right now is the coronavirus. We are getting the vaccine now so that we can be protected against the virus. But as the previous speakers have indicated, it doesn't mean that you are completely protected from getting the virus if you got a vaccine, but at least if you were to get it, if you are vaccinated, you stand a better chance of getting a less severe infection. Okay, and another reason why clinical trials are conducted is to determine the drug safety. Quite often, clinical trials, when they are conducted in people who have the particular disease that we are looking at treating or that we are researching. But children and pregnant women are not always included in a clinical trial right from the word go. We first want to check if it's safe on everybody else before we move to, we consider them a bit more vulnerable, children and pregnant women. So by the time they get to that stage where they are tested on children and pregnant women, they've already been confirmed to be safe on everybody else who has that particular disease or condition. Okay, and another instance where a clinical trial needs to be conducted is where we have a product on the market, but it's been believed by researchers to be effective on a different condition. A good example there would be Viagra. I'm not sure if there are some who know how we got to having Viagra being used for erectile dysfunction. That was discovered accidentally while during a cardiovascular clinical trial. So the treatment of erectile dysfunction was found accidentally. The scientists didn't know, researchers didn't know at that time that it would be effective for erectile dysfunction as well. But then they saw that as a positive side effect, but that also has to go through clinical trials, its own clinical trial, to confirm that indeed Viagra is effective against erectile dysfunction. Okay, yeah, so that is about why we need clinical trials. Who and why you would consider a clinical trial? There are certain questions that you might want to get answers for before considering to get involved in a clinical trial, or whoever has to approve it before they decide to even approve it for you to be involved in that particular clinical trial. The most important thing is that medical intervention safe for use in human beings? Has it been proven to be effective against that particular disease to which it's intended? And if there are already other treatments on the market, how does it fare against the standard interventions that we already have? Because if it's not going to make much of a difference, why then do we even bother doing that clinical trial if it's not going to make any difference? Okay, and who needs to take part on a clinical trial? There are set guidelines, as we've already mentioned, that determine how a trial is conducted and who fits the eligibility criteria to be part of that clinical trial. There is an eligibility criteria, so it doesn't mean that if it's a clinical trial for cardiovascular disease, anybody with that kind of a condition will end up on that clinical trial. No, there are set guidelines as to who can and who can't be part of that clinical trial. It also okay. The other people who can consider taking part in a clinical trial are those who have been intolerant to treatments, to standard treatment that is already available. So when there are clinical trials about that particular condition, they could find it more beneficial to participate in that clinical trial. They might find that that new product is helping them as opposed to what they have been on and what they couldn't handle. And at times there are not even alternatives. There is no alternative treatment for a particular condition. So it would be beneficial for a person who's suffering. Quite often it's your rare diseases. It would be beneficial for somebody who has that rare disease to consider taking part in a clinical trial to ensure that they help towards getting treatment for that particular condition. Okay, clinical trials are generally monitored. So if you are out there, you are not part of a clinical trial, you are not part of the reviewing of the clinical trials, you might be wondering, how do we ultimately get to have this particular vaccine in the country? Who looked at it and what they look at? Yes, they are.
Sorry to disturb you, Ms. Kuta, but you have about 5 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Yes, we have bodies that are responsible for ensuring that a clinical trial that is being conducted is looked at closely before it's approved and the product is given to people in the country. And the two bodies we are talking about, that will be your research ethics committees, as well as SAPRA, that is headed by Dr. Smith Makokotlela, the previous speaker. These are the people that we can trust to do thorough review of a clinical trial before they give approval. They are the ones who give approval for a clinical trial to find itself in our country. So by the time you see it, it's been through their hands. They have ensured that everything that needs to be looked at has been looked at. And she also touched on inspections, audits and inspections. Even after approval, these clinical trials are still inspected or audited to ensure that what SAPRA and the ethics committees have approved is still being done the way that according to their approval it's supposed to be done. Okay, and we have different types of clinical trials, but the most popular is the method is the placebo-controlled trials. These are the trials where some within the participant population will not be getting the active drug. Or for a while, they will not get the active drug, but they will get it at some point later. And yeah, so even if this is done with clinical trials, that clinical trial for a life-threatening condition is not going to be approved if it has a placebo arm. Because as you can imagine, if it's a life-threatening condition, nobody can afford to wait until later to get the active drug, or nobody can be deprived the opportunity of getting the active drug for the benefit of a clinical trial. Okay, and then we have different phases of it for a clinical trial. For it to end up being where it is, where people are recruited to be part of it, it's gone through a couple of phases already. And those phases, each one of them has to be approved. The preclinical trial phase is the phase where the trial is first done in the laboratory to ensure that it is achieving what is expected to be achieved out of that particular molecule. And most trials die at that phase. Not all the trials that are done during that phase will make it to the next phases. And then the phase 1 is where healthy humans are recruited to, so it's a small number of people to check if this particular molecule is safe for using humans, and that is it's at that point where the dosage is determined. And then the next phase, then after confirming what we've just talked about, safety and the highest safe dose, it will be phase 2. Now, here it's the product is exposed to people with that particular condition for the very first time to check if this particular molecule is efficacious on that particular condition. If after this phase it's confirmed that, yeah, this molecule is still safe and efficacious, then it moves to phase 3, higher number of people, and more confirmation of safety and efficacy, also looking at the pharmacokinetic and the pharmacodynamic effects of this particular drug on your body. Now, after all this is confirmed, we move to phase 4. Remember that each of these phases are approved. No phase goes to every phase needs to be approved before we go to the very next phase. So phase 4 is after the drug, we are convinced that we have all the safety confirmation that this particular drug can now be rolled out, and pharmacies can be allowed to sell this particular product, and so on and so on. But that is not the end of it. we still collect, or the manufacturer still collects safety information about that particular product, even if it's approved. If there are concerning side effects, then the manufacturer still collects that information and is still expected by the regulator, SAHPRA, for example, to submit that information. So safety is continuously monitored, even for registered products. And that is the end of our story about clinical trials.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kutho, for shedding light on the clinical trials. And I believe what you've just said means that, everything that has to be done has been done. So I believe that there are questions coming, and there are people who have questions about the clinical trials. If you can just raise your hand, and we'll get our questions rolling. But before we take the questions, so I got a question from WhatsApp from Khauta, and she is asking, have all the vaccines that are being used now for COVID-19, have they gone through all the clinical trials, or are we in a clinical trial? That's the question.
Okay, they have gone through the phases. For example, the preclinical phase, which is the very first, which is done either on animals or in the laboratory and or on animals. Yes, they have gone through those phases, but one of the things that Dr. Simeti touched on is the emergency use authorization. They do not yet have full approval because clinical trials are continuing on this particular vaccine. What they have instead is emergency use authorization, meaning that we do not yet have I don't know. I don't think it's safe to say we don't have all the necessary information as yet, but we have information that confirms that this particular vaccine is working, but more information is still required. So as a result, we are not, as SAHPRA, going to give full approval, but we are giving emergency use authorization because we find ourselves in an emergency situation now where we cannot afford to say no to these particular vaccines.
Okay. I suppose especially because they have gone through some clinical trials, and they have gone through some tests which have shown that there is some good efficacy, and that there is some established safety.
Yes.
Okay. So I see there's a hand from Maporu, Mabuatsela, and Bafedile. So I'll take a question first from Mabuatsela Maporu, and then I'll take a question from Bafedile. Mabuatsela Maporu, your question, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, mine is not really about the process, but when there's people who are volunteering to do the clinical trials, volunteer, are they financially compensated? I want to know if I can make mine out of this. And also, if it happens that you die during this trial, maybe by the vaccine itself, is your family going to be compensated? But this is just financial related question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your question. Yes, for phase 1 clinical trials, yes, there is compensation, but for the next phases of the clinical trial as well, there is compensation, but not as much as for phase 1 clinical trials. And phase 1 clinical trials, we actually don't have many of those taking place in South Africa. For all the other phases, phase 2 and phase 3 mostly, there is compensation, but it's not to an extent where you say you can make a living out of taking part in a clinical trial. It's more a reimbursement for your time you took off to go to the clinical trial site for a study visit, compensation for your meals,
Okay.
compensation for your transport. Yes,
Yeah.
there is compensation. And you
Alright.
also mentioned what happens should someone die while they're participating in a clinical trial. Okay, it has to also be looked at. Did you die as a result of participating in a clinical trial? Is it because of this product, or you died because you were involved in a motor vehicle accident? But if it is believed that the product had an effect on you that resulted in you dying, yes, there is a clinical trial insurance. It's part of the informed consent form that you sign when you get involved in a clinical trial. We do mention in there that there is
Okay.
insurance.
All right. Yes, Ms. Kutro, nothing, no money is too little, please. Every money is welcome. Times are tough. Bafedile, your question, please.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for this interesting and controversial, and still getting more information. Yes, thanks a lot. And I like that question of the trials because it was my question. I really wanted to ask that question, and hey, yeah, I still feel that we are taking risks, but sometimes I understand why we are doing this. I mean, people were dying at a very fast rate. Something had to be done. I don't know if ever I'm wrong to have that kind of a thinking. The other question that I want to ask is, there are so many controversies or controversial ideas amongst the scientists, amongst the researchers themselves with the vaccines. How can I, or how can we here convince a layperson to really take the vaccine? Thank you.
Okay, how can we convince a layperson to take part? I think first, if they understand that there are people whose mandate it is to ensure that these products are safe for use, then that will allay their fears. Obviously, not everyone. There is a lot of propaganda out there regarding clinical trials, so you might not win with everyone. But if they know that there are people who are tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that whatever product that ends up here has been checked, they are scientists good enough to see or assess if this product is good enough for use on our bodies, and they are taking them also, then yeah, that should to a certain extent allay people's fears. I don't know if that is sufficient answer to you.
Yeah, I think that there's just so much information being circulated by everyone, but like Bafedile is asking, even this amongst the community of scientists, there's still questions, and there's still just the other day I saw one doctor talk about ivermectin. It doesn't work. The other one comes back, it works. The other one, it doesn't work. So really, if you're a lay person, you will take information that is suitable to you. And what could be suitable to you at that moment is that I'm not going to vaccinate. So irrespective of some little bit of information that is positive, you hang on to what is making you feel good at that moment. But thank you, Bafedile, for the question. And earlier on, I asked about the variant. I mean, one of the biggest questions that is going around is the vaccines that we have now, that we are using now, the Johnson and the Pfizer. Were they not created against a particular variant? And I hope Dr. Boshoff is still with us here, and I would like her, or whatever her sort of input into trying to explain the issue with the variants. Does every variant require its own vaccine, or what is it about? Because that's another question. People are saying, I'm not gonna vaccinate because the vaccines were derived before there was even a beta variant. There's only the alpha variant then. So Dr. Boshoff, are you still there? Do you want to give a comment?
Yes, so I'm still here. No. So I still think, although there's many variants, it's still positive to be vaccinated. So there is a variation, and it's usually to do, as one of the previous speakers said, with the transmission capability of the virus. But it's still the same type of virus that's going to infect you. So therefore, although the vaccine was maybe made against one of the first virus variants, it will still elicit a proper immune response. So I still think it's a good thing to be vaccinated. Doesn't matter what the variant will be. We don't need to have a vaccine for each of the various variants, as you will still have proper immune response against the coronavirus or the COVID virus. So it's still a good thing to be vaccinated. For vaccines, it's also a virus. A virus needs a cell to infect and to remain going. So if we can vaccinate and stop spread of the virus, it will stop spreading of the disease.
Okay, clearly Dr. Boshoff is an advocate of vaccination, and there was a hand from Sunny Boy Matlangu. I don't know if you've been answered because your hand went down. I noticed a hand from the Renata, but before Renata, Sunny Boy, you had a question. I don't know if your question has been answered.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Go ahead.
Okay. Is it safe if you are allergic to injections and then they vaccinate you and then you're allergic to those injections? For example, my wife, they've been injected. She was having other sicknesses, but that injection doesn't sit well with her. But I don't know if it is safe to vaccinate, then you are allergic to those injections they give you at hospitals or clinics.
Okay. Well, from what I know, Mrs. Kutu, I'll give you time to answer, but from what I know is that there is a consent form that you sign before you vaccinate, and then you answer all those questions. So, for example, there's a question: Are you allergic to any of have you shown some allergy to any of the injections? And then obviously you answer. I don't know if now you don't know that it's a new allergy. Then I don't know how do they work it out. But otherwise, there is a set of questions that you answer, whether you're allergic or whether you have shown any other response that is negative to any of injections previously in your life. And then obviously if you answer yes, then you are treated with caution, and you probably they don't continue with you. I don't know what they do, but Mrs. Kuto will be able to answer.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes, the allergy issue is also taken into consideration when trials are done, and I take it that when vaccination is done as well. That is why if you have vaccinated, you will remember that after getting that injection, they keep you there for about 20 minutes. Is to see if you are going to have if you were going to have a serious allergic reaction, it's likely to happen during that those few minutes, the first few minutes. So it's for them to observe if you are going to have a bad reaction to what they've just given you. So when you say someone is allergic to injections, they might not be allergic to all. Remember that an injection, it can be a penicillin injection, it can be an injection with a new vaccine on the market, it can be an injection with, it can be just any product that it's being injected onto you. So it's unlikely that you will be allergic to all of those medicines that are given parenterally, if I can say that. But yes, allergies are looked at that time, and you might not also know that you are allergic to this particular product that you are receiving now. So my understanding is that for those who vaccinated recently, I don't remember now, but my understanding is that when you get vaccinated, you are also given information to say, should anything happen, should you have untoward side effects, contact this number or see your healthcare provider ASAP and let them know that you've
Yes.
just been vaccinated.
Yes, they do that. Thank you. Amos, if you can just mute your mic, please. Okay, I think I've muted you. I think you have been answered. Renata, your question, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tauge. My question pertains to vaccine injuries. And obviously, I'm a microbiologist, so I believe in vaccination. I think my question is for Dr. Boshoff. It's something I don't understand, so this is purely curiosity. They inject you with a little piece of mRNA, and then one of the injuries is myocarditis. How do you go from a little piece of mRNA to an inflamed heart? What happens that some people have this negative reaction?
Renata, I'm honest, I really also don't understand that part. So I mean, the mRNA is just there really to reproduce a part of the virus.
Yes.
So it's not supposed to have really a negative effect, as it's really one of the proteins of the virus that are produced by your own cells. It's not hijacking your cells really. It's not changing your DNA itself. But how it's got such a severe effect on some of the patients' hearts, I really also don't know.
That is what I don't understand. It's supposed to be harmless.
Supposed to be harmless, and it's
Yes.
mRNA, so that's why I say it's not hijacking your DNA.
Exactly. So I just thought it was just me.
No.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
I can't answer you.
Yeah, I suppose those are some of the questions that we should repost to SAHPRA and to ask them to, what are they seeing? Because obviously it is a part of their job to collect the, all the, the reactions or the side effects or whatever the contraindications that occur during this vaccination process that we are in. And I suppose that the quality and safety is based on what has been seen and what we know, and what we know is always evolving. So I believe that as we go along with these processes, we'll be able to to understand more. And for those of you who are really listening, you can see that some issues are very also quite difficult for the scientists. Renata is my colleague, Professor Renata Roof-van-der-Merwe, and then Dr. Boshoff is also my colleague, but we're still also looking for more information so that we can all be able to understand what is going on. I see there's another question. I don't know if Kinsa, you wanted to say something on this one, Mrs. Kuto. I'm so used to calling you by the first name. Did you want to say something on this one, or should I go to the next question?
No, let's move to the next question. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I see there is a hand from Professor Yvonne Paul. Your question, please. I think this will be the last question and then we are closing. So please just hang in for a moment. Don't lock off yet. And for those of you who have not filled in the attendance register, David, can you please just repost it, make a fresh repost, and the assessment form, so that people, before they log off, they can quickly do the attendance registry and also do the evaluation. And for students, remember, there is a students competition that is we have an opportunity to win a tablet, and just look out for the question in the coming few days. The National Science Week will take place for the whole week, and TUT will be taking part in today's sessions, which is just supposed to be wrapped up. There's another session tomorrow at 3, and there's also another session on Friday. I'll move over to Yvonne's question. Sorry for putting you on hold, Yvonne, your question.
Thank you very much, Doc. With the Delta variant that is very prevalent in many countries, we started off with Johnson & Johnson, then AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines. Is it advisable or recommended that one takes a booster, or is it just a speculation that it would aid with the Delta variant? And yeah, that's the question.
Okay, Mrs. Kuto, I'm sure this one you'll be able to answer. This one is yours.
Maybe not fully, but yeah. It's been mentioned already that we are still, clinical trials are still ongoing with these products, right? Which means that even the J&J vaccine that some of us got might later require a booster dose. Why is that? Is because new variances are coming up and we don't know for sure what to expect. I think Dr. Simiti touched on that as well, that we might end up needing boosters, but we don't know for sure where we are going to need a booster and at what point, because these are still undergoing trials. That is why we don't have them fully approved, but they have emergency use authorization. Research is still ongoing on these products. So yes, we might need boosters in future.
Okay. All right, and somebody on the WhatsApp line is following up on that question, and she's asking, why don't we have boosters for the vaccinations that we take children to, like against polio and all of them, and why all of a sudden we need boosters or second shots or whatever you call it for the COVID-19?
Okay, I think I'm going to need Dr. Boshoff to help answer those. But remember, all that I can say is that vaccines are totally different for totally different conditions. So it doesn't, and not all of the vaccinations that children get do not need boosters. Some do have boosters. I think measles is one of them where children still get a booster, I think at 12, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, it's because they are diseases are totally different. Vaccinations for them, totally different. I'll hand over to Dr. Boshoff to elaborate.
Do you want to add, Dr. Boshoff?
Yes, so it really depends on the type of vaccine. So I just touched on two types. So the one was the whole organism vaccine. That's just been a weakened pathogen. So with those, and that's the Johnson & Johnson method being used. It's still a virus particle that still replicates the normal way. So you still have millions of particles of viruses that the immune reaction are responded to. They do not need boosters. For the dead viruses that cannot replicate, so if you only are injected with 10 particles, you will only have an immune response against 10 particles, as they can't replicate. mRNA have a very short lifespan. So although with the mRNA vaccine, they reproduce or they make copies of some of the capsid proteins or some of the attachment proteins, they also have a very short lifespan. So they can't make new ones indefinite and keep continuing to trigger the immune response. So after a while, we have to have a booster to make sure that we have a larger immune response of antibodies at the end.
Oh, okay. So is the purpose of getting your immune response to be where we want it to be?
Exactly. So it's just to trigger the immune response again to activate more antibodies. So it really depends on the type of vaccine and how the virus really work in the vaccine, if we need a booster or not.
Okay. I see there's one hand and we have about 10 minutes, so I will give you an opportunity. But I was expecting to have people here who are like, just asking normal questions like, does the vaccine cause the COVID or not? Because those are some of the questions that you get from the street, right? And no, this vaccine is making people sick. So I was expecting to get some of those questions, but I see that we have very learned people in this platform. They're not asking such questions. But before we wrap up, I see there's a hand from Casey Tolle. Casey Tolle, you are the last person. So if there was a jackpot to be won, you would have won it. So please ask your question before we allow our two speakers to wrap up and to give their last message if they do have. Casey Tolle. Khuliso, you just had to squeeze in your hand, right? Casey Tolle, your question, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my question is directed to Dr. Boshoff. previously, earlier she touched on saying that vaccines makes the immune system to produce more antibodies quickly. So my question is, if you were infected with COVID-19 and then you recovered without vaccination, so if it happens that you are exposed to the COVID-19 once again, so will your immune system produce more antibodies quickly, or you need to be vaccinated?
Dr. Boshoff, quickly.
You still need to be vaccinated. So, and that's the same principle as why do you need to be vaccinated for a second time, or why do you need a booster shot? So although you had maybe COVID, your immune memory is still quite low. So if you get exposed for a second time, you will have a higher immune memory, and the quicker and more antibodies will be produced. So it's exactly the same as getting a booster shot after you had maybe COVID in a natural way as well. Go and get vaccinated.
Okay, Kuliso? Your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. My question is on the blood clots, because on social media, there's been reports that apparently some people who got vaccinated encountered some blood clots and some cardio issues, right? So my question is it advisable then that after taking the vaccine, people can take something that can actually help with that to eliminate maybe the formation of the clots? Because I also heard that people are taking Disprin to help with that.
Well, from what I know, it's not like officially like that, but I don't know. Mrs. Kuto, anything official on that?
Nothing really official, but what I can say is that first of all, you don't even know if you were going to get a blood clot. We do not know who is going to get a blood clot. It cannot be predicted, right? And secondly, if you remember the numbers of the cases who were reported to have had blood clots after vaccination, it amounts to 1 in a million cases. That is the chance of getting blood clot as a result of a vaccine. 1 in a million cases. So you will take Disprin, you will take this and that, anticoagulants, but you might not even be a case that was going to get blood clots. Another thing about blood clots is that there are many other conditions that would predispose you to getting blood clots in a more, what can I say? You are more prone to getting blood clots, for example, from some contraceptives than you are from getting vaccinated. So yeah, it doesn't really necessitate you taking anything to try and stop getting blood clots.
Okay. All right. I think I would allow my speakers 1 minute to close up, and then so that we can officially close the session, so that we can move to another activity. If you don't have the National Science Week calendar or the activity for the week, please look them up and try to get hold of them. Very interesting topics, very interesting webinars, and for students, even interesting opportunities to further your studies. Dr. Boshoff, your closing message, please, quickly.
I think my closing message will be for people that are still afraid of the vaccine or afraid of the virus.
Oopsie, what happened to the Dr. Boshoff? Okay. I think the network is doing its usual things. It has behaved so far.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so I think for everybody that's still not sure, do not read all the fake messages on Facebook and Twitter. Go and read proper scientific articles and try to familiarize yourself with viruses and vaccines, advantages and disadvantages always, and then really take a proper informed decision on the way forward.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Kuto?
Yeah, I concur with Dr. Boshoff. I don't think WhatsApp and other social media platforms are a good source of information for you to decide whether or whether not to go for vaccination. And another thing, one last thing I wanted to say is that I am happy with the way clinical trials gained prominence as a result of the pandemic. So that is one good thing that came out of this particular pandemic. People got to know about the existence of clinical trials and what they are all about. What is a vaccine? What is it? What is a virus? So yeah, let's look on the positive side. We are much more informed, much more clever as a result of the pandemic. And to everyone else, thank you for making the time to attend this, and thank you once more for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you very much to our speakers and to our audience, the students, academic staff members from TUT, from other institutions, students from all over, and everyone else who's just a general member of the public. Thank you for logging in, and thank you for attending our seminar. I believe that you are better informed, and I believe that you have changed your mind, that you're going to vaccinate as soon as you log out. And, with a little bit of information sharing with you, we will reduce the hesitancy levels in the country. Please be safe, take care, continue to sanitize, continue to wear your mask, continue to wash your hands, continue to do everything that you can. And remember that vaccination is not complete until you have done your double doses with the Pfizer jab, and that you have at least a month after the second jab to be sure that you have built up some immunity. If a single jab of the Pfizer vaccination doesn't mean that you are fully vaccinated. So so let's do the right things and take the advice that they give you when you go to vaccinate at the different sites. For those that will see tomorrow, see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for supporting our webinar, and thank you so much for logging in. And we can make it through science. We are making it through science. Science is making the difference in our lives. Thank you.